One. Order, order. Harriet Cross to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg to move that this House has considered the future of business property relief and agricultural property relief.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I rise today to address a pressing issue that affects not only my constituents in Gordon and Buchan, but also rural communities and family-run businesses across the entirety of the United Kingdom. As we approach the autumn budget, there is growing anxiety yet to be put to bed among farmers and family business owners about the potential changes to agricultural and business property reliefs. APR and BPR play a crucial role in securing the longevity of farming and family businesses. Without IHT reliefs, the value of an individual's business assets will be chargeable at a full 40%. The rate of inheritance tax in the UK kicks in at a relatively low value in relation to the value of farming assets, even for a small farm, particularly when compared to that of other countries. There is speculation in the media, and this is coupled with government silence on the future of these reliefs, and it is causing profound problems. In a meeting I had with the Country Land and Business Association just yesterday, I heard how some of their members are already taking rash and rushed concerns because of this matter. Decisions that will impact their businesses, their tax position and their operations for years to come. Their members, our constituents, are fearing the worst in terms of changes to APR and BPR at the budget and the profound impact that this may have on their businesses. Businesses that are, in many cases, providing employment for their families and wider communities and have been for generations. APR and BPR are not, as some would have us believe, just tax loopholes for the wealthy. To view these as reliefs as fair game in a budget shows a complete lack of understanding of their importance and their function. APR and BPR are lifelines for hard-working family farms and entrepreneurs who form the backbones of our rural communities and local economies the length of the country. The same businesses that us MPs are always too delighted to be seen to visit and to champion as pillars of our communities and for their hard-working entrepreneurial spirit. But it's time that we now put these words into actions. Put simply, many of these businesses would not survive a succession event without APR or BPR. It's that simple. There is a reason why these reliefs have been in place for almost 50 years, and that's because they work and because they are needed. And because without them, farming and family businesses across the landscape would change, and the UK's rural and business landscape would be unrecognisable. Agricultural businesses are vital not only for economic activity, but also for food production and security, land stewardship and environmental management. As farmers face ever tighter margins from increased environmental obligations, spiking input costs and global market pressures, there is already considerable strain on farming profitability. It's important to understand that while farms have high asset values, they are often very cash poor. In 2022-23, across all types of farms, 17% of farms were failing to make a profit, and 59% were taking home less than £50,000. And even where a profit is made, this is usually directly reinvested back into the farm, the business, in order to increase efficiency, develop or adapt. Cash does not simply sit idly. It is usually invested into assets needed to grow the farm and allow it to function, be that via land, buildings or kit. APR is also vital for ensuring farms can be passed to the next generation without a crippling inheritance tax bill. The continuity of family farms is needed for maintaining our agricultural heritage and expertise and, crucially, generational stewardship of our countryside and responsibility for food production. Without APR, many families would be forced to sell their land or their buildings or even split up the farm in order to pay inheritance tax bills. A bill that, even for the most modest of farms, could be hundreds of thousands of pounds, if not into the millions. This would mean that selling the very assets and losing the scale needed to operate, to produce food, and fundamentally undermining the viability of these businesses. And it's important to appreciate that farms don't operate in isolation. Farms typically engage with multiple businesses in close proximity to their holdings. In my recent meeting with NFU Scotland, I was told about a farm in North East Scotland that engages with no fewer than 92 separate businesses within just a few mile radius of their property. therefore benefiting from this one farm. So the closure of a single farm will have a ripple effect throughout every local economy. The average age of a farmer in the UK is 59, and 35% of farmers are aged over 65. And we all know that it is very common to see farmers still managing their holdings well into their 70th or 80th decade. But this does mean that on family farms, a succession event, planned or otherwise, can hit very suddenly. Without these reliefs, we risk losing a generation of farmers, threatening the future of British agriculture. Many family businesses will simply cease to exist if these reliefs are removed. The impact will extend far beyond just landowners, but also to tenancies and the wider rural economy. In a recent poll by the CLA of over 500 landowners and farmers, 86% said they are likely to have to sell some or all of their land if upon a death, if inheritance tax reliefs were scrapped. And the same poll showed that 90% of respondents said that this would damage UK's food security in the long run. And I do find that really hard to disagree with. And the potential loss of productive agricultural and farmland has serious implications for our national food security. And I will remind the Minister of the line in the Labour manifesto that food security is national security. Let's also consider the alternative. If large areas of land were sold because they had to cover an IHT bill, who is now likely to buy that land? Will it be another farmer who also is going to have to manage their own capital in light of their own family's IHT bill down the line? Or a large corporate company where boardrooms and bottom lines will dictate their approach to environmental management, room for nature and food production? And I don't think that that's the ownership and business structure of rural Britain that this government, or indeed any of us, is striving for. We must also consider the impact on tenants as well as landowning farmers. Any changes to APR that makes it less appealing for a tenancy to be created will have a detrimental impact on tenants, the tenancy sector and the next generation of farmers. Yeah. But moving to BPR, we need to consider the... Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Marcus Campbell save.
Thanks very much. I might have this wrong. I understand that the Tenant Farmers Association have suggested that there could be scope for reforming these taxes in a way that's actually of benefit to long-term tenancies. What's the members' view on whether those reforms would be worthwhile?
Thank you. I mean, I'd obviously have to see what the TFA were suggesting, but I think what we need to look at is the whole agricultural sector as a whole. If land is being taken out of farming for any purpose, that land is not going to be available for tenants. So if landowners at the moment are feeling compelled to sell their land because they have to cover an IHT bill, it doesn't matter what's going to happen with reforms down the line, that land isn't going to be available for tenants to access. And I mean, I fully support the tenanted sector. It's a vital part of our farming sector, but it on its own will not be enough to keep land in production. But as I say, turning to BPR, it's important for every family business, the length and breadth of the country, and therefore in all of our constituencies. Family-owned businesses are the beating heart of the British economy. Across the UK, there are approximately 5.3 million family businesses, employing over 14 million people and contributing £225 billion per annum to the Treasury. BPR is especially vital for small family businesses, like many of those in my constituency of Gordon and Buchan, and which form the backbone of local economies, providing much needed local employment, stability and resilience in the face of economic and environmental challenges. Businesses that rely on BPR to survive a succession event are often significant local employers, and their failure would have a knock-on effect on local services and business rates vital for local authorities. Other models of business ownership, such as PLCs and those backed by private equity, do not face a tax charge on the change of ownership. So BPR is a vital mechanism to ensure that in respect to family businesses, they are at least on a playing field when each year we have 85,000 of these businesses being passed to the next generation. About 77% of family SMEs are first-generation businesses. Without BPR, these family firms would lose the opportunity to grow and transition into successful next-generation businesses. If, following a succession event, businesses effectively have to take a 40% hit on their finances or their asset base to cover an IHT bill, what chance is there of these businesses to grow, secure longevity and flourish into the future? So as we approach the budget, I hope the Minister and his government will take on board what is heard throughout this debate today. And that, in my opinion, is to maintain that these reliefs are vital to the long-term planning and investment of rural areas and family businesses. And it's not overstating to say that the future of rural communities and our food security really does depend on it. In particular, the government should focus on the following 4 things, and that is, firstly, to provide clarity and reassurance of their intentions regarding APR and BPR, commit to maintaining these reliefs in their current form for at least the duration of this Parliament, commission an independent review in the wider economic and social impact of these reliefs beyond just the direct costs to the Treasury, and engage meaningfully with rural communities, farmers and family business owners before pursuing any future changes. In conclusion, APR and BPR are not just mere tax reliefs, they are the foundation of a thriving, sustainable and entrepreneurial United Kingdom. They support our farmers and family businesses that have put the pillars in our communities and have been there for generations. They ensure that businesses can continue to operate following a succession event and allow for long-term planning necessary for farms and family businesses to develop and thrive. And I look forward to hearing the contributions of members today on this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The question is that this House has considered business property relief and agricultural property relief. I call Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I congratulate the honourable member for securing the debate. And I know we've already spoken briefly at an APG meeting about the similarities between our constituencies. She and I both know the importance of a thriving agricultural sector. We both know the importance of the jobs that it provides, the employment it provides, and the almost kind of undefinable contribution it makes to the character of the constituency and to a community. I'm concerned that farmers in my constituency have told me that they've been dealing with the chaos of the economy for the last 14 years. They've been dealing with crashing consumer confidence. They've been dealing with an international trading situation in this country that simply is not conducive to long-term success of the agricultural sector. For example, the Australia-New Zealand trade deal that was a betrayal of the sheep farmers in my constituency in particular, and has threatened their long-term business prospects. So when the Minister responds, I hope that he'll not just respond to the particular points made here, but also to how we can make sure that the economy is stable, is secure, is on firm foundations, and that we can never again see our farmers sold down the river as they once were. I happily give way.
I'm extremely grateful to the honourable gentleman. Would he, though, not acknowledge that in the last 18 months the Canadian deal was not signed, in particular, in order to take account of concerns of the agricultural sector? The pressing immediate concern that we must get a resolution from in this encounter with the Minister today is how this government is disposed towards agricultural property relief and business property relief. That is their concern now, whatever happened previously, and he's making a political point, but we've got to focus on his government's responsibility in the coming 2 weeks.
Respond as a backbencher to a debate like this. So we will allow Joe Morris to respond, but apparently that is not the done thing.
Now, I sought advice on this matter from the Chief Whip prior to coming to this, and that's why.
The Chairman of Ways and Means, and it's in our rule book that it's not. It's highly, highly unusual. I'll allow Joe Morris to respond, but hopefully it's not going to be a back and forth with the shadow cabinet and backbenchers.
I'll also make a very brief university point and say it's highly unusual to have a Mansfield College MP and to be on a Mansfield College MP. It's probably the first time this has happened in this Parliament. Look, I take his point. I'm glad that the last government learned some of the lessons of the Australia trade deal and implemented them. I think it's important that we, get an answer on APR and BPR. I understand I'm making a slightly political point. And I hope he'll humour me for it. But it's important that we maintain that international trade is an ongoing piece, and the agricultural sector does not exist in isolation. None of these reliefs exist in isolation. Farming, more than anything, is an industry that sits between. It has concerns that go to the Treasury, go to DEFRA, go to business and trade. It is more than any other industry almost reliant on good cross-party and cross-departmental working. and we need to ensure that government does that. So I do hope that we don't just consider these things in isolation, but we do consider them overall and together, and how we can make sure that government is working towards securing them. One of the main concerns that I picked up from my constituency, frankly, is just the inability and the inability of consumers to be able to distinguish between British and foreign produce when it's badged up the wrong way. And I do hope that the Treasury will be listening to representations on how we can combat that kind of false advertising when foreign produce is repackaged as UK produce. But how we keep the family farm going and how we make sure that small farmers are able to continue to produce in the Tyne Valley is something that is really deeply concerning to me. I've spoken to a lot of local farmers about land loss, about large corporations buying up prime agricultural land and using it to, I think it's fair to say, greenwash. I think that is a genuinely national issue that requires cross-party cohesion, cross-party solutions, and you know, my own kind of hackneyed political point scoring perhaps is not going to help in that. But in the long term and in this Parliament, I would always welcome working to address that. However, it is important, I think, and I would urge the Minister to remember that farmers are businesses. They need long-term consumer confidence. They need an overall business climate that rewards investment, rewards entrepreneurialism, but one that is not built on sand. One that is built on secure, stable foundations, and one that is open to serious cross-party working. So when we look at how we get the rural economy growing, how we can make sure that both land-owning farms and tenanted farms in particular can continue to employ people, can continue to make sure that there is money going out of those farms into the local economy, is really important. And I've spoken to my constituents about the pressures they've faced to, in some cases, take farms out of production to grow crops that do not need the manpower, whereas previously they would have done. You know, they would have employed people to work those fields, would employ people to work that livestock, and they've been forced by, I think, often badly designed initiatives from DEFRA, and I know that we need to work cross-party to make sure those initiatives are better designed in future. They have been forced into those measures that, over the course of many years, slowly do their workforce down, bring their workforce down, and lead to less money coming to the local economy. So I just hope the Minister, in his response, can make sure that the Treasury hears the pleas of rural communities, and that it is a genuinely cross-party concerning issue, and that my constituents are very, very, very concerned about the ongoing taking out of food production of prime agricultural land. Thank you, Chair.
Can I remind members to bob if they wish to make a speech, and then we will calculate the time and whether we need a time limit. I call Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you very much, Dr Huck. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I congratulate the Honourable Lady from Gordon and Buchan in securing a very timely debate, and indeed for providing us with what is now definitely my favourite euphemism, the succession event. I think we know what that means in most cases. This is, though, a timely debate. We've had a lot of speculation in the media in recent weeks about the possibility of changes coming in the budget very soon. There's very little, Dr Huck, that is certain in politics these days, but I am as near certain as anybody can be that when the Minister comes to reply that he will tell us that he is not going to tell us anything about the budget. Now, I understand the reasons for that, and they are essentially sound reasons, which are long-standing and respected by all. But it does illustrate, rather, actually, just the inadequacy of this as a way of effecting meaningful change. Because without the ability to have a proper debate involving Treasury, then change will inevitably come in a haphazard and chaotic way, and it will bring with it many unintended consequences which will have an effect not just on farmers, but also on the wider rural community. And I should have said right at the start that I have my own interests in agriculture, which are registered in the Register of Members' Interests, and I would remind the House of that. So there may be a case for reform, but this really is not the way to go about making it. The Honourable Lady from Gordon Buchan said that farming is a capital-rich and revenue-poor industry, and she was absolutely right in that. And of course, the effects of any changes in farming will have consequences that spread beyond agricultural businesses. So, what affects farmers will affect vets, it will affect agricultural merchants, it will then affect local shops, post offices in some of the most economically fragile communities that are to be found anywhere in the country. And my concern has long been, and it's not exclusive to this government, but the Treasury doesn't quite understand the way in which the rural economy works. It is cliché, but it is true to say that farming underpins just about everything in the rural community and the rural economy. Whether that is environmental, in the way in which land is managed and the consequences for nature in that, or indeed financially. The Tenant Farmers Association, in providing a briefing for today's debate, did speak about the consequences that they're seeing already amongst their members. And they're saying, we're already seeing first-hand concerns about how inheritance tax changes change the way that traditional estates have thought about the management of their agricultural land. And that is done before there are any change to the inheritance tax regime. Rural estates with significant residential and mineral interests will want to ensure that they have sufficient business activity elsewhere in their estates to be able to qualify for BPR from inheritance tax across the whole of their estates. If APR was abolished, this will make things hugely much more difficult for farm tenants. Now, that is, I think, an important point that comes right to the heart of this matter, and it's why I'm so pleased that the Honourable Lady actually framed this debate to cover APR and BPR both, because they do work in an interlinked sort of way. And it also shows the responsibility that we all have in politics in setting hares running like this. North of the border, for the last few years, we have had an active and often welcome debate in relation to land reform. But one of the consequences of that land reform debate has meant that many agricultural land owners, instead of moving out and putting in tenants, have actually moved then to making grasslets. And a lot of the larger landowners, the estates in particular, have ended the secure agricultural tenancies for which they had been known for generations and replaced them with a much less secure system of tenure. So, as the TFA themselves say, there might well be a case for reform here. They suggest moves that could be used to reward longer tenancies of 10 years plus, or indeed even more secure tenancies. That's a debate that has to be had, but it's not something that you can actually effect in a meaningful way that looks at agricultural spending in the round once the decision has already been announced in a budget, because there are so many other different influences at play here. We've seen in recent years the changes to reform of agricultural support payments in England and Wales, and now coming through in Scotland. And there are other different forces at play. For decades, farmers have been told you have to diversify. Diversify, diversify, diversify. So farmers have gone round, they have taken farm cottages into renovation, they've put them into furnished holiday lets, and now farmers are being told that they're the ones who are responsible for the housing crisis in the country, and they're being hit with furnished holiday let reform also, something that appears to have been inherited by this government from the previous one. It is also the case that inheritance tax is something that can be avoided by inter vivus transfers, but that is something which can often be arbitrary in the way in which it works, and it also can have some really difficult personal consequences when it comes to the transfer of one generation to the other, the family interaction that can be so difficult. So, I congratulate the Honourable Lady. I hope that when the Chancellor does deliver the budget next week, if this is something that is under active consideration by the Treasury, then what we will see is the direction of travel and the overall picture that the government wants to achieve, rather than just one quick hit, because that one quick hit could have serious consequences for family farms and rural communities right across the country.
For Brandon.
Thank you, Dr Huck. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Gordon and Buchan, for securing this debate on agricultural property relief and business property relief. Like her, I represent a constituency with a large rural community with many farms and agricultural businesses. So I'm acutely aware of just how important this relief is for the long-term viability of farming and the wider implications for UK food security. There is already a recruitment crisis in the sector, which is heavily reliant on families to work in farming into the future. And whilst I would, of course, encourage young people to look into agricultural and land-based courses, such as the ones offered at the excellent Reese Heath College in my constituency, it's fair to say that farming is often in the blood, with the skills and knowledge passed down from generation to generation. If the physical means to farm, the land and the property are not also passed down to the next generation, then we risk losing the people, the knowledge, the skills that we desperately need to keep this sector viable. I've spoken to farmers who are clear that changes to agricultural property relief would mean that land would have to be sold in order to cover the cost of subsequent tax bills. And I know that this is the case across the country. According to a large CLA poll, 86% of farmers said that all or part of their land would need to be sold when they passed away if agricultural property relief was removed. Farmers have already been through a challenging time. Rising costs for energy and fertiliser, inflation and adverse weather are just some of the issues that farmers have faced in recent years. The government needs to stand by farmers and support them, not restrict and punish them, as the removal of APR would do. Across the House, we rightly say that food security is national security. Farmers need land to produce food. If the government removes protections that are in place to exempt farmland from the inheritance tax, it will be yet another step to putting our food security at greater risk. This is a very real problem that is pertinent to all of us, whether we are farmers or not, because all of us rely on food that is grown to feed our nation. Many farmers across Chester South and Edinburgh provide jobs directly and indirectly, for instance, through food production or hospitality that relies on local produce. Farmers are also essential for land management and maintaining our environment. This policy threatens the future of the countryside. I would remind the Minister that he stood on a manifesto that committed to not raising taxes on working people. I would respectfully suggest that any change in the current rules and rates of agricultural property relief would be contradictory to that promise. Farmers are working people. They work incredibly hard, often without the recognition they deserve, and they must be supported, not penalised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleasure always to serve under your chairship, and probably for more than once this week, but nonetheless, it's lovely to see in your place. Can I, first of all, thank the Honourable Lady for Gordon and Buchan for setting the scene so very well, and by doing so, she's given us all an opportunity to make a contribution to an issue which is really important, and I'll explain, perhaps if I can, why that is. So it is an honour to speak on a subject that's just not just a matter of fiscal policy, but is of vital importance to the very backbone of the United Kingdom, our farming and agriculture. I declare an interest as a farmer, landowner and a member of the Ulster Farmers Union for some 40 years. The reason I joined the Ulster Farmers Union was not because of the fact that we owned land, it was because the insurance premiums were very cheap. The fact was that they maybe not quite as cheap now, but then no insurance is as cheap now as it used to be, and that's a fact. I can attest to the importance of agricultural property relief APR in ensuring the sustainability and longevity of farming enterprises across our great nation, and more specifically in my constituency of Strangford, which I'm going to speak to very specifically and outline some of the reasons why it's important. Farming is not just an industry, it is much, much more. It's a way of life. It's about generations of families working the land, providing food, maintaining the landscape and contributing to the rural economy. But more than that, it's also about stewardship. And the Honourable Lady in her introduction referred to that as well, and I think it's really important we focus on that. Farmers are custodians of the countryside, caring for the environment whilst ensuring food production to feed the nation. That's everyone, not just the farmers, everyone that lives in this great nation. Agricultural property relief plays a critical role in maintaining that balance, allowing farming families to pass on their land and businesses without crippling tax burdens. Agricultural property relief is one of the key supports for farming families across the United Kingdom, and in Strangford it is absolutely essential. In Northern Ireland, agriculture is responsible for some £501 million in income as of 2021. A substantial 8.3% increase from 2020. It's no exaggeration to say that agriculture is at the heart of our economy. Everyone has said it. It is so critical to everyone. There hasn't been a person who has spoken so far who hasn't made that comment on our rural communities. Strangford, my constituency in particular, is home to a vibrant agri-food sector that employs thousands of people, whether through major employers like Willowbrook Foods, Lakeland Dairies or Mass Direct. These companies are household names. They are family businesses started as farms and then diversified, the very point that Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland referred to. And they have ensured the sustainability of our rural communities. Without APR, these family-run enterprises could be forced to sell land and assets just to meet the inheritance tax liabilities, potentially dismantling businesses that have been built up over generations. So this issue, this very critical key issue, is so important to the future of my constituency farming community and indeed for those businesses as well. Without EPR, these family-run enterprises could be forced to sell the land assets just to meet the inheritance tax liabilities. So clearly agriculture is not just a business. It is a fabric of rural life. We often talk about food security, environmental stewardship, rural economies, and yet with the right fiscal support, these very pillars of our country are put at risk. And this debate is, for that reason, so important. APR helps farmers plan for the future, ensuring that the next generation that can take over the family farm without being forced into financial hardship. It allows them to focus on what they do best, producing high-quality food, maintaining biodiversity and contributing significantly to rural economies. We have a rich agricultural tradition. Our dairy farmers, our sheep farmers, our pig farmers, our vegetable growers are amongst the best in the world, and they take immense pride in their work. Lakeland Dairies, which employs some over 250 people in my constituency. Mass Direct, which employs another 230. They have been the cornerstones of our agri-foods economy in my constituency. And let's not forget a very specific issue, Madam Chair, the Cumber Early. As you will say, what's a Cumber Early? It's a potato with a protected geographical indication, PGI status, meaning it is recognised across Europe for its unique quality, grown right there in the fields of Strangford. These enterprises are not just businesses, they are a way of life. But it's not just about tradition, it's about innovation as well. Because innovation is part of what farmers do. They're not just the boys who plough the fields and scatter the seed. It's almost like that hymn, we plough the fields and scatter. Take Mass Direct, for example, a family-run business that began in the kitchen 20 years ago, now supplies some of the largest retailers in the United Kingdom, including Asda and Spar. They're forward-thinking. They've installed solar panels and pressing on sustainable practices, all while providing hearty, healthy food at affordable prices. Lakeland Dairies, meanwhile, exports its milk products across all of the world. It contributes to the economy. Again, these are family businesses that started off in a very small way and have grown and have created jobs. There are success stories, and we must ensure that the tax system supports their continued growth and not hampers them. So that's why today, Madam Chair, I'm calling on government to ensure that agriculture property relief remains intact and that it's not reduced or removed as part of any future tax policy. We must give farmers the confidence to invest in their business, to innovate, to continue producing the high-quality food for our nation. The very last thing we need is for farms to be sold off piecemeal because families cannot afford the tax burden. Let us be clear, APR is not a loophole for the wealthy. It is a lifeline for farming families who are working hard day in and day out to maintain their land and their livelihoods. And Strangford, where agriculture is not just part of the economy, but a part of our identity. It's who we are. It's one of the persons you see stand in a very small way in front of you today. This support is absolutely vital. As we look ahead to the future of UK farming post-Brexit, with new trade deals, changing subsidy regimes and heightened environmental targets, we must ensure that the fiscal framework surrounding agriculture is robust and supportive. APR is a crucial part of that framework, allowing farmers to pass on their business, invest in new technologies. You want to intervene? No? Okay. And ensure that rural communities remain vibrant and sustainable. Farmers in Strangford and across the United Kingdom are already taking steps to reduce emissions, embrace low-emission technology and promote biodiversity. However, these efforts cannot come at the cost of a financial liability. So if you want to build it, you've got to make sure that they're able to do that. Many of our improvements needed to reduce emissions, such as upgrading from farm infrastructure, require significant investment. The Honourable Lady referred to that in her introduction. It put the scene very clearly. What the money that we make goes back into the farms and builds it and moves forward in the modern way that it should. APR helps ensure that farmers have the financial security to make those investments. Without it, we risk not only failing our farming communities, but also our environmental goals. I say this to the Minister very kindly. The Minister knows how I work. I don't criticise. I don't give people a hard time. But I do make the point. And the President, Secretary of State for the Environment, he has made it very clear that Labour is committed to achieving environmental goals. The farmers that I represent and others represent here, they're also committed to those environmental goals. And that can only happen if they have the money to invest for that purpose. I'd also like to mention the need for better protection of farmland from schemes like solar farms and pylons, which can remove valuable agricultural land from production. Whilst we must embrace, and we have to embrace, renewable energy, we must also ensure that food production remains central to our land use framework. So it has to be a key balance. Many others who were in the last government and in this one will understand that. We need to strike the right balance between energy production and food security. Farmers should not be forced to choose between their livelihoods and environmental progress. Both can and both must go hand in hand. I conclude with this, Madam Chair. I've spoken fairly quickly. I think I've got more words at the moment than anybody's ever had. Farming is at the heart of our nation, and agriculture property relief is at the heart of farming. Without APR, many of our farming families like those in Strangford and across this great nation, would face unsurmountable challenges. The loss of this vital relief would be a blow not just to rural communities, but to our food security, our economy and our environment. All those things, Madam Chair, every one of them are critically important. So let's ensure that we continue to back our farmers, protect our rural communities, safeguard our food security by maintaining agricultural property relief. I urge the Government to make this commitment and to recognise that the future of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, farming depends on this very issue. Thank you.
The backbenchers, Patrick Spencer.
Thank you, Dr. Huck. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I also join the throng of people who are paying tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Gordon and Buchan, for delivering this very important debate. I, like many people, am motivated to engage in this debate because I represent a rural constituency made up of many small and large farm holdings. Suffolk, without making this sound like my maiden speech, is a beautiful rural constituency with a stunning landscape, but is known for its contribution not just to our food system, but also home to many market towns where you'll find family-owned butchers and bakers and grocers who source their produce from local farms. Even breweries. Adnams is actually in the next-door constituency, but it also sources all of its ingredients for its famous beers and its famous products from farms in the local area. 1 in 7 jobs in Suffolk have some relationship to the food production industry. You only have to go to the Suffolk Show to see the importance of farms, farming and agriculture to our local economy. As a result, we have to take seriously the livelihood and financial sustainability of our farms. And it's worth remembering, actually, that farms are, as many people have said before here today, small businesses with very tight margins and high capital costs. One way we could highly threaten the long-term financial sustainability of those farms that are so integral to our economy and our community is to threaten the owners with a tax if they were to pass the family farm down to the next generation. Now, let me explain why I think this is a bad idea. Like taxing a lot of forms of capital, you are demanding liquidity from a resource that is fundamentally illiquid. The government will, as we've heard before, but let me reiterate it, the government will fundamentally force many farms to sell off parcels of land. When those farm owners realise it's hard to sell off small parcels of land, they'll in fact be forced to fire sale their whole holding. Don't believe me, 86% of respondents to a poll of farmers conducted by the Country Land and Business Association said that they would have to sell some or all of their land if they were faced with a new IHT obligation. The second reason this is a bad idea for those that are able to shoulder the cost of a new tax on their farm and on their business, they will simply have to reallocate a lot of their capital away from the more productive sources of investment, such as capital machinery and labour, both with grossly negative economic and social consequences. My next door neighbour is a relatively well-heeled farmer who also uses his land to provide a wedding venue and rental properties that we've already heard about. Now, if you place them under more financial stress, they will simply have to close down those businesses. And let's not forget that many of those businesses provide really important jobs, really important incomes, and fundamentally pay tax in our economy. So we're taxing one half of the equation only to take away from the other. And then the third reason that I think this is a terrible idea is that fundamentally the repeal of the agricultural relief and business relief for farms will yield a relatively irrelevant amount of money in the long run. We've all read the IFS report that says that agricultural relief costs the Exchequer £400 million a year. Now, I know many people, both in the Treasury and bluntly on the other side of the House, will see many landowners as rich rent seekers who invest in property to avoid IHT. But let's look at the contribution people like James Dyson have made to our food production industry. Look at the impact he's made incorporating technology and environmental standards to the sector, or the incredible impact of the Grosvenor Group on restoring peatland and moorlands in parts of Cheshire and Lancashire, which will have a hugely positive impact on the wildlife numbers there, as well as carbon emissions. And if the Treasury genuinely believe that by taxing farmers in the hope that it will, they will release land available to housing developers and property developers, trust me, you are not going to solve the housing crisis building houses on farmland in Suffolk. The reality is the housing crisis will be solved by investing in units in towns and cities where young people really want to live, where footfall already exists. And irrespective of looking at all the positive impact that many people in farming have had, this argument completely negates the thousands of small families who are not rich, who may have to be forced to sell their farm despite having tended to the land for generations. The imposition of a new tax on inherited land will have a sad impact on the family-owned farms, like many owned in my constituency, that are too many to name, who I know have spoken in recent years of the increasing difficulty of running their farms as a result of the current economic climate. They've had to meander a labyrinth of new environmental regulations, a new post-Brexit payment system, an energy crisis that's pushed their costs through the roof, higher interest rates, increasing competition from abroad. To remove agricultural relief and business relief from some of these small family-owned farms could push many over the edge. And what a loss that would be. What a loss that would be to our economy, to our communities, and to the many families who have owned, farmed and maintained their land for generations and will continue to for generations to come. Thank you very much.
So the Liberal Democrats, Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wanting to leave something for your children as a parent is just a natural part of that role. But right now, inheritance tax is quite unfair. Families face a high tax rate, which is very high by international standards, and tax-free allowances have been frozen for some time as house prices and inflation have gone up significantly. It's understandable that people I've met on the doorsteps in Woking over the last years have said that they're worried about their families being caught up by that tax, even though they're by no means wealthy. Meanwhile, economists and policy experts have expressed concerns that some of the ways in which inheritance tax reliefs can be used. The aim of business property relief is to make sure that family businesses can pass from one generation to the next. And we think, and I think, and I hope everyone here agrees that that's a notable aim. Woking is a town teeming with family businesses, and indeed we all have family businesses in our constituencies that are near and dear to our constituents. These businesses enrich our areas economically, but also culturally, making our areas all unique from each other. We need to make sure that those family businesses are really genuinely protected by new rules. and they can continue from one generation to the next and be genuinely sustainable. So that we've got that stewardship of that history and the heritage of our local areas. However, experts point out that certain provisions within business property relief are not particularly well targeted at local family businesses or small businesses who are usually in most need of support. For example, it's been noted that 100% relief applies in the same degree to businesses of all sizes, even though you've got large corporations worth several billion or micro, small family shops or farms. There are also questions about the different accountancy practices used. These can give certain financial portfolios the same treatment as a local family-owned shop, pub or manufacturing business. I would welcome the Minister's thoughts on these issues and how they envisage supporting cherished family-owned companies that champion the heritage and local economy that I've spoken of in my constituency and elsewhere in the country. It's equally important that family-owned farming businesses are preserved and protected, and I know that's what most of the contributions in this debate have focused on. Farming is absolutely vital for our rural communities, and it provides the foundation for our whole economy, but our food security. We need to have the raw materials and guarantee that safety. As we live in a more dangerous world, we need to be able to feed ourselves. I again wish to hear the Minister's views on how we continue to support agricultural businesses, make sure they continue to operate as a family business, creating jobs and adding really, really good value to their area. I would also urge the Minister to practically recognise the contribution of our farmers by accelerating the rollout of the new Environmental Land Management Scheme, properly funding it with an extra £1 billion a year to support profitable, sustainable and nature-friendly farming. Madam Chair, after years of Conservative chaos and neglect, there is no doubt that our NHS and social care, our schools, our local authorities and other public services desperately need more investment, so I can understand why the government may look at different options for raising revenue. Our GPs are overstretched, hospitals are overcrowded and school buildings are crumbling. But at the same time, families and pensioners are struggling with the rising cost of living. The Conservatives put up their taxes by freezing tax thresholds for years. It would be wrong to ask those residents again to pay to clear up the Conservative mess. That's why the Liberal Democrats would focus tax changes to make the system fairer, such as reversing the Conservative Party's tax cuts for big banks, imposing a proper windfall tax on super profits of oil and gas companies. Responsible public finances are essential for the stability, certainty and confidence that drive economic growth and for getting mortgage rates under control. Thank you.
And for His Majesty's loyal opposition, Nigel Huddleston.
Thank you, Dr. Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And may I first congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Gordon and Buchan, for securing this important debate. And I'd like to thank all of those who've participated to the debate today and for their thoughtful contributions. I was particularly entertained to hear everybody's friend, the honourable member for Strangford, saying he doesn't give anybody a hard time. But I can warn the Minister, you can expect persistent, relentless, vigorous, but polite nudging. It may not be defined a hard time, but it certainly sometimes feels like that. But very polite, I have to say. Now, there's a few other points raised today. I won't delve into some of the issues raised. I'm happy to have a debate with the honourable gentleman under different circumstances about international trade, given that I negotiated some of those trade deals. But I do want to give him the reassurance, and I can tell him and the NFU and others who had a very strong voice and who we listened to very carefully in the construction of trade deals, their opinion, their views and their point was very, very often made. And we tried to put safeguards in place, which were not always acknowledged, but I think that's a debate for another day. The honourable gentleman, spokesperson for the Lib Dems, raising a whole bunch of other issues, again, debate for another day. But where we are today, now I'm aware that just 2 weeks before the government delivers the budget, the Minister will be unwilling and, to be fair, unable to comment in detail on the issues that have been raised today. But I think it's important that he and the Treasury team hears and reflects upon the concerns and fears expressed by members on behalf of their constituents today, and indeed other stakeholders, because they could be quite considerably impacted by any changes to inheritance tax relief, and in particular business property relief and agriculture property relief. Now, my party recognises and supports wealth creation. It's really important. It helps pay for our public services, but we also understand the importance of ensuring that wealthy individuals make a fair contribution and pay tax appropriately. And earlier this year, the Minister and I had another debate on the broader issues of inheritance tax, where we recognised that we don't have a wealth tax in this country, but there are taxes on wealth, and inheritance tax is one of them, and it's important. It brings in, I think, something like £7.6 billion last year. And of course, we have a progressive tax system as well. The top 1% of income taxpayers pay 28% of all income tax, so they do contribute a huge amount. And of course, the vast majority of estates don't pay inheritance tax, only about 5% do, because we've got so many exemptions and reliefs. And it is very, very important to recognise those reliefs as absolutely legitimate. There is abuse in the tax system. There are loopholes that need closing, and HMRC and the Treasury and others spend a lot of time closing those loopholes. But let's not forget, these reliefs are there for a reason. Business property relief and agriculture property relief are perfectly legitimate reliefs, and without them, many businesses, including farms, would cease to exist or be broken up upon the passing of the previous owner. And these reliefs form a critical part of overall business planning, and especially succession planning. Many businesses, in particular small businesses, have expressed anxiety about the prospect of changes to or the abolition of business property relief. Currently, business relief is applied at either 50 or 100% on qualifying businesses when working out how much inheritance tax should be paid. And this allows businesses and business assets or shares to be passed on to the next generation without the need to jeopardise the viability of, or even the existence of, vital businesses. And without this relief, many more family-owned businesses would have to be sold or be broken up in order to pay a big inheritance tax bill. Prior to the election, many businesses and many business bodies, including the likes of the Federation of Small Business, believed that they had heard and received commitments and assurances on inheritance tax and BPR from the Labour Party, and I know that many small businesses in my constituency and across the country are seeking a reiteration of those assurances. BPR also plays an important part in attracting and retaining certain investments in the alternative investment market, for example. And according to some analysts, if BPR is removed from the alternative investment market, it could result in a loss of value of between 14 and 21 billion pounds to UK shareholders and would permanently damage the AIM. I know that given the importance of inheritance tax relief to the AIM, they are also looking for the government to confirm its continuation. Uncertainty and speculation around its continuation may already be jeopardising investment. Regarding agriculture property relief, which many honourable members raised and focused on today for the very appropriate reasons, as many said, it is so vital to the continuation of our rural way of life and our countryside. Now, regarding this relief, the NFU, the Country Landowners Association and others are concerned about the renewed uncertainty and the impact on farming, including on tenant farmers. Some fear that APR may be removed, but perhaps some form of BPR may be kept, for example, but even that could mean landowners are deterred from letting their land to tenants. And the Honourable Member, the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, talked about some of the further considerations and concerns, particularly on tenant farmers. And as many colleagues have said today, many farms would simply not survive the imposition of inheritance tax, and families who have in many cases farmed the land for generations may be forced to give up their businesses, their farms, their homes. This could jeopardise the sustainability of the rural economy, as well as undermine efforts towards greater self-sufficiency in food production and compromise environmental goals broadly agreed by both the former and the current governments. Now, I understand that last year the then Shadow Secretary of State for DEFRA, but now actual Secretary of State for DEFRA, did confirm that the Labour Party had no plans to change inheritance tax, including APR, if Labour won the election. Sadly, speculation has since arisen, and I don't believe further assurances have been given by the Secretary of State nor the Treasury. If the Minister was able to provide any certainty or even indication to provide additional confidence, it would be welcomed by me, many of my constituents, and as we have heard today, many of honourable members' constituents, many farmers, many investors and business owners right across the country. Labour, of course, did not mention APR or BPR in their manifesto, nor make statements about them during the election campaign. But they did clearly state that Labour would not increase taxes on working people. And as we have heard today, farmers and family business owners are very clearly working people, and this was a point the Honourable Member for Chester South and Edisbury made very well. So I hope the Minister will agree. It's therefore perfectly reasonable to assume, given all of the comments we've heard before from the Labour Party, that there are no plans and should be no plans to change the inheritance tax relief system, especially, as I have said, these reliefs play such an important part in investment decisions and business planning. I therefore look forward to him providing us with at least some of the reassurances that we are seeking today in his concluding comments. Thank you.
Dr. Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve in this debate with you in the chair. And let me begin by joining others in congratulating the Honourable Lady, the member for Gordon and Buchan, for securing this debate. I'd also like to thank all honourable members for their contributions, including the opposition minister's advice on what to expect from the honourable member for Strangford in my new role. Now, as many members have rightly highlighted, there has been, of course, a great deal of speculation in recent weeks about potential changes to taxation ahead of the budget, including to the reliefs we are debating today. Now, honourable members will understand, and indeed many of them acknowledged in their speeches that they understand, that I cannot add to that speculation. The budget is on October the 30th, and the Chancellor will set out any changes to the tax system then in the normal way. However, ahead of that, I welcome this opportunity to hear the views from members on this matter. Let me very briefly start by setting out the context for this budget, though. Following the spending audit in July, the Chancellor has been clear that difficult decisions lie ahead on spending, welfare and taxation to address the £22 billion black hole that we inherited from the previous government. Decisions on how to address that will be taken at the budget in the round, and it is crucial that we get the public finances back on a firm footing so that we can restore economic stability. On those foundations, we will boost investment, increase growth across the UK and improve public services. That is the prize ahead, and that is how we will make people across Britain better off. Now, Dr. Huck, to turn to inheritance tax and how it operates within the UK tax system. Inheritance tax, as other members have referred to, is a wealth transfer tax and applies to the estate of the deceased. Transfers made in the 7 years before death are also taken into account. The estates of all individuals benefit from a £325,000 nil band rate. The residence nil band rate is a further £175,000 and is available to those passing on a qualifying residence on death to their direct descendants, such as children or grandchildren. That means altogether qualifying estates can pass on up to £500,000, and furthermore, the qualifying estate of a surviving spouse or civil partner can pass on up to £1 million without an inheritance tax liability, because any unused nil rate or residence nil rate band is transferable to the surviving spouse or civil partner. Now, above those thresholds, of course, the headline rate is 40%, but it is important to remember that that rate is only charged on the part of the estate that is above the threshold and after the application of reliefs, which is obviously the subject of the debate today. So let me turn first to business property relief. This relief is a long-standing part of the inheritance tax system. It is designed to ensure that businesses do not need to be broken up or sold on the death of an owner in order to pay an inheritance tax liability. This reflects concerns that there may not always be enough liquid assets in the business to pay the tax. Subject to certain qualifying conditions, the relief generally applies to unquoted shares and interests in a business. It also applies to shares designated as not listed on a recognised stock exchange, such as shares that are quoted on AIM, as mentioned by the opposition minister. The rate of business property relief is usually 100%, but it can be 50% in some circumstances. In fact, until March 1992, the maximum rate of the relief was 50%, and there was a lower rate of 30% alongside that. Honourable members may be interested to know that the cost of the relief has risen from £685 million in 2019-20 to a forecast £1.3 billion in 23-24. Moving on, Dr Huck, to agricultural property relief, which is also a long-standing part of the system. It has a similar purpose to business property relief, although the main benefit is to ensure the relief is available when land is let to tenant farmers, as we heard from various honourable members today. This is largely because owner-occupiers of agricultural land also qualify for full business property relief. Now again, the rate of this relief, agricultural property relief, is usually 100%, but it can be 50% in some circumstances, and like business property relief, lower rates existed before 1992. The cost of this relief has risen from £320 million in 2019-20 to a forecast £365 million in 23-24. Now, Dr Huck, there are many different views about these reliefs. I know that stakeholders, including Family Business UK and the Country Land and Business Association, have argued strongly against any prospect of these reliefs being abolished. Other organisations are in favour of changes to the relief. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has suggested a cap on such reliefs could allow those passing on small farms or businesses to be taken out of inheritance tax, whilst preventing agricultural and business investments from being used to avoid inheritance tax. The Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, who I thank for his contribution, said that it may be a case for certain reforms of agricultural property relief, which he referred to in his speech. Of course, the previous government had views on these reliefs. I understand from reports in the Telegraph that the previous government considered abolishing these reliefs as part of reforms to the system. And I welcome the opportunity today to have heard from members their views, particularly around agricultural property relief, but also issues relating to farmers and their constituents more widely. The Honourable Member for Chester South and Eddisbury rightly highlighted the importance of food security for this government and the importance of that in our policy making. The Honourable Member for Strangford, in nudging me gently, to quote the Opposition Minister, spoke eloquently about the importance of farming in his constituency and in the economy of Northern Ireland. The Honourable Member for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich spoke about some of the wider challenges facing the farming community, not least energy bills in recent years. And the Honourable Member for Hexham, I think, is proving himself to be a very effective constituency MP already, raising a number of important issues on behalf of those he represents, as well as drawing importance to the wider significance of having economic stability and security for farmers and everyone in his constituency. Dr. I'll give way.
It's our fault for doing this, that we've focused very much on the family farm as the unit of concern here, because that's what concerns most of our constituents. But in fact, a lot of agricultural land is owned by bodies now like the RSPB, for example, of which I am a member, and the RSPB is never going to have a succession event, to join the expression of the Honourable Lady from Gordon and Buchan. So the consequence of abolition would be that two farms right next door to each other, one owned by a charity or an institution of that sort, and another owned by a family, would be left having to farm in very different economic circumstances. Is that really fair?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his point, although he presupposes he knows what is going to happen to agricultural property relief, which obviously is something that I cannot comment on further, as set out earlier in this debate. He will have to wait a couple of weeks, perhaps, to have further conversations about what the government does in this space. But I thank him for his comment, as I do for all honourable members today, because it has been an interesting debate, and as we've heard today, generates some strong views amongst many of our constituents and members here who represent them. I understand there are many different views about what the government should do, and this opportunity has allowed me to hear them. And as always, the government welcomes all opinions and keeps all taxes under reviews. But I return to my earlier point, which is the Chancellor will, of course, announce changes to the tax system at the budget. There is not long to wait. Thank you very much.
Sorry, to respond to all that long.
Chair, I'm grateful for the opportunity to wind up this debate, and I thank all honourable members for their contributions and for the Minister for his closing remarks. And I think a constant theme of today's debate has been the importance of the role of family businesses and family farms and their really, really vital role for our rural economy. And as the honourable member for Orkney and Shetland quite rightly said, and of course well knows from his ultra-rural island constituencies and communities that the interconnection of farms and other local businesses is something that can't be denied, and it will have a knock-on effect. Any impact on farming impacts everything else, whether that's marts, vets, suppliers. The knock-on is endless. And I fully agree and echo with my honourable friend for Chester, South and Edinburgh the government's commitment not to increase taxes on working people. If farmers and family businesses are not the pure definition of a working person, then I really don't know what is. Similarly, I welcome the comments for the Honourable Member for Hexham on the need of cross-party working on this, and as we all strive to secure a stable rural environment for the economy or employment, it's something that's really important, and absolutely work cross-party going forward on that. Farms and businesses must adapt and innovate to survive between generations, and as the Honourable Member for Strangford correctly identified, the ability of farms and family businesses to do this will be severely hampered by changes to APR and BPR. They must be able to survive between generations as well as during single generations. And put very simply, you need cash in order to pay a tax bill. We all know as well that you need, therefore, a lot of cash to pay a very large tax bill. And for many farmers and family businesses, as my honourable friend for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich put it so succinctly, asking a farmer to pay a tax bill from an illiquid asset is very difficult when you do not have liquid to play with. And I thank the Minister, as I said, for his response, and I do appreciate that we are less than 2 weeks out for the budget and therefore completely unable to confirm or deny rumours. But I do hope that the concerns that have been raised here today have been heard and will be taken in good faith and considered, because they are not just concerns of people in this room, they are concerns of our constituents, of farmers and small businesses, family businesses, the length and breadth of the country. And indeed, you pointed out that the cost of these, I think it was BPR, has risen to 1.3 billion, but this compares in very favourably to the 225 billion of tax income from family businesses to the Exchequer each year. And I will just conclude saying that I reiterate my calls for clarity on this matter, maintenance of these reliefs, and meaningful engagement with affected communities in any matters like this going forward. And the contributions today have strengthened the case for actions on these. Our rural communities, family businesses and food security, stewardship of our countryside all depend on certainty that these reliefs provide. So in closing, I'd like to thank all members for their contributions today on this important debate.
The question is that this House has considered business property relief and agricultural property relief. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. Sitting suspended.